Hello and welcome to the Confusion to Clarity podcast. This podcast is for anybody who needs that reminder that they really are capable of achieving amazing things. Each week, we will be diving deep into all things mindset, manifestation, and spirituality. Hosted by me, Natalie, a clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, coach, mum, and lover of all things mindset and manifestation. When listening, I want to give you a break from reality. I'm going to share with you the tools and techniques that you need to make your goals reality so you can stop playing small. Hello and welcome back. I hope everybody listening is doing good. You had a lovely weekend. So today I wanted to talk about balance, how we can create balance in our lives and why it is so important to have that balance. Now, my life at the moment actually feels a bit unbalanced, so I'm acknowledging this and putting steps into place to regain that control, and I'm going to share those tips and techniques with you today. So I'm sure, like lots of people listening, you've also had children off on half term. My kids have had 2 weeks off, so it's been a lot of juggling around childcare and work. We also have a massive birthdays. The first week of half term, we have 3 birthdays in 1 week. So we have my eldest daughter, Nicole, then we have my birthday, and then 4 days later, we have my husband's birthday. So it is the most hectic and the most calorific week. Just like sick of cake by the end of it and celebrating. And then we have a 2-week break, and then we have my middle daughter, Darcy, her birthday on the 14th of November, and then my youngest, my son, his birthday is on the 28th of November, and then suddenly it's 3 weeks and then it's Christmas. So yeah, really bad planning on our part. So what with fitting in all the birthday celebrations, work, and as I said, juggling half term, it's really left me feeling frantic. So when I feel like this, I always go back to basics. I overhaul my routine and just kind of look at where there is that imbalance in my life. So that's kind of why I decided to talk about this topic today. And also because with a lot of my clients over the past couple of weeks, this has been something we have talked about, this lack of balance, this kind of feeling of frustration. Now, on average, most of the clients that I work with me for around 6 weeks. However, I do have a large number of clients who stay with me beyond that time and come back to me for monthly sessions. So my monthly sessions are a bit like the mind gym. So I describe it, I hope it makes sense to everybody else, that if you were to go to the actual gym for your physical health, then the sessions with me monthly are like the mind gym for your mental health. We just overhaul the month, we look at what's been good, and this is always really helpful to do because often clients will say to me that, oh, nothing particular has been that good this month, it's just been a bit kind of, run of the mill. But actually when we look over the month and we talk about, what has happened, actually they begin to notice and identify positives. But it also gives us the opportunity to reframe things so we can begin to see them from a different viewpoint. So if, for example, somebody has said something, maybe wasn't as that good, or maybe they didn't handle it in a way that they felt was the best way to do so, we can talk through and reframe that. And often then clients do notice they're doing a lot better than what they're giving themselves credit for. So with balance, how do we know then if we aren't balanced? And I think really simply, it comes down to feeling it. We've all been there. We've all been there when we're trying to juggle a million balls in the air all at once. And although we might not have dropped any of those balls, we know that could change at any given moment. So maybe you're noticing that you're feeling more tired than normal or short-tempered. Maybe you're snapping and you've just noticing you've got a lot less patience. That's always kind of a key thing in the half term, isn't it? Maybe you're not making time for yourself and you're letting all those good habits slip. So like the early nights, the meditation, the journaling. And sometimes during the monthly calls that I have with my clients, they might mention to me, oh, I'm just not feeling as good as I kind of was last month, or I just can't put my finger on, why I don't feel 100%. And I can guarantee that this is always followed when I ask about their mindset routine and they kind of say that it's slipped. Now, of course, we have to be kind to ourselves. We live in a really fast-paced, busy world. We're all cramming lots of things in. But this is why it is so important to cultivate that balance. And not doing so just leaves us feeling an absolute frazzled, frustrated mess. So I wonder if you are familiar with masculine and feminine energy. Now, this was something that I only learned about a few years ago, but when I heard about it, it just made so much sense. So we all have masculine and feminine energy within us, and it's not about being a kind of more masculine woman or feminine man. It's not gender specific or related. You might have maybe heard it described as like that yin and yang energy. But the masculine energy is like the forceful, it's like the getting shit done energy. It's where we're making things happen. So if we're manifesting or navigating our way through a difficult time, it's that forward thinking, like this is going to happen. The other side is the softer feminine energy, which is the nurturing side. But in order to have that harmony in our life, we need both of those energies in balance. And I had a really insightful call with my really good friend the other week, Laura. She is fascinating. She's a mindset coach as well. She talks about confidence, relationships. Like, she's kind of my guru. If I need somebody to talk to, she's the person I go to. And we were talking about divine femininity, and this is something that she's been working on herself recently. And it was really interesting hearing her talk about it. So much so, just as I'm kind of saying this now, I'm thinking about it, I need to get her on here as a guest and do an episode on it because it was so interesting. So I'm not sure if Laura listens to this. I think she does. If you're listening, we need to sort that out. We need to get you on here as a guest and do a whole episode. And Laura has the most amazing energy, so it would be a brilliant episode. So I'm making a mental note to arrange that. I digress. But embracing your divine feminine is all about the softer side. It's about that looking after your looking after yourself. It's not about that doing kind of those nice things for anybody else's benefit, for like your partner, for example, but about for yourself. So, when was the last time you did something nice for you that was just for the benefit of making you feel good? And I think as women, and I'm sure there are men who listen to this as well and who can relate, but, we often do things for other people, like we do our hair and makeup because we're going out. I'm not saying do your hair and full face of makeup to sit around the house, because nobody's got time for that. But it is just about, doing those things that are for you, that make you feel good about yourself. So I first became aware of the feminine and masculine energy about 5 years ago. And it was around the time I was moving house. So a good friend of mine, she's really fascinating. She's a psychic. She's also an angel card reader. She's very knowledgeable and has a really incredible energy about her. So when we were moving house, it was a huge deal. Okay. So yeah, it's kind of a huge story. But in our previous house, the house we lived in for, I think we were there 7 years, in the end, we had the neighbour from hell. So I could literally do a whole podcast on its own, just on the experience I had living in that house. And anybody listening who knew me at that time will be sitting there nodding their head in agreement and probably laughing, because things were that bad. Honestly, it was quite unbelievably bad. Some of the things that happened, and I mean, we can kind of look back and laugh now just about. And I'm not talking about like a grumpy old man neighbour who was complaining about the kids playing ball games in the garden or out the front. Our neighbour actually had paranoid schizophrenia. And it is really sad, because he was failed by the mental health system. And he believed he was a healer. He believed he had superpowers and that he was sent to heal the world. He believed my husband and I were devil worshippers, and that he needed to eradicate us. Yeah. So we were stuck living there with him for years. We actually couldn't move. The house we actually bought as a huge renovation project. It was pretty much unlivable when we first moved in there. So it was a huge renovation project. Because of that, we couldn't sell it. We were literally stuck there. And because of all the problems we were having with him, we had the police involved and authorities involved. So we couldn't, we just couldn't move, long story short. So we were stuck there. And it was a really, very, very challenging and testing time. So you can kind of see there that moving, when we were able to move eventually, was a really big deal. So in the process of moving, lots was going on. It was a very, very stressful time. And at this point, I spoke to my friend, and she was just like, whoa, like, Natalie, your like masculine energy is so dominant here. And I was like, I know, but like, this is such a big thing moving. And the move wasn't that stressful. I mean, in terms of moving, it was fairly quick, but anybody who's moved house, the buying and selling process in the UK is not without its challenges and stresses. And because there was so much riding on it for me, I think I was probably making it more stressful than it needed to be, or certainly my mind was making it more stressful. So my friend said to me, she was like, your masculine energy is so dominant. She said, you need to create a balance. And that's when she explained to me about the feminine and masculine energy. So she told me on that night when we'd had this call, she was like, right, I want you this evening to just zone out. She said, I want you just to take yourself off and just like really pamper yourself. She said, have a nice like bath, use all your like good products maybe you'd say for a special occasion. And she said, just really focus on you. And at first I was a bit like, oh, well, I can't do that. I can't just switch off. But then equally, me sitting there stressing about it wasn't conducive to anything. So I listened to her advice. I spent that evening just like having a really nice shower, washed my hair, put a hair treatment on, shaved my legs. Dave probably thought he was in luck. And I just did as she said. And the next day, I actually did feel so much better. And it just really proved to me the importance of having that real balance in your life. So if we look outside of ourselves, for example, and we look at nature or the moon, everything works in cycles. Everything has a balance. So when we're looking at seasons, if we look at spring, that's when there's new beginnings, new cycles. We have summer where, we are enjoying kind of all the things that we planted in the spring. Then we have the autumn where we're harvesting and preparing for winter. And then obviously winter is that time of rest, that season where everything is kind of recharging and going quiet. If we're aware of the natural world having cycles and this balance, then why don't we apply the same principles to ourselves? We don't go around criticizing hedgehogs or bears or animals that hibernate during the winter for being like lazy fuckers. We're like, well, that's just what they do. And they're getting that rest. Now, I'm not saying that obviously we all need to hibernate and shut ourselves away for months on end. Although maybe that might be quite nice at times. But it's all about creating that balance, creating that rest, creating that kind of time for pushing forwards and that time for resting and nurturing and looking after ourselves. For those of us who have menstrual cycles, have you ever tracked your menstrual cycle around your mood and productivity? It's really fascinating and it's such a great insight into how you function as a person. Now, of course, if you don't have menstrual cycles, then you can look at the moon phases, which work in a very similar way. So with the new moon, it's that kind of recharging, setting intentions, and then the full moon, like releasing, and then the different cycles in between. And that in itself is a really in-depth topic. So I think I'll do a whole podcast episode on that. But certainly, there's some really good apps where you can track your menstrual cycles, and I started using one and it was really fascinating because the one I use is called Flow, obviously not sponsored by them, but it's really interesting because it sends you through like notifications. You may be feeling like this today or you may be feeling like that, and it's really interesting because especially like near the time when you're due one, if you're feeling just like, oh, I've got no energy, everything seems so much of an effort, you can then be kinder to yourself and go, I'm not just being unmotivated and lazy, it's because of this. So having that awareness allows us to be kinder to ourselves and also create that balance. And you might find when you look at like your cycles or how you function as a person, that actually there are times of the month where you are more like kind of get going, productive, and maybe that's the time you do certain activities. And then, other parts of the month is the time where you don't challenge yourself. For example, I did a big challenge in my Facebook group earlier this year. And it was like a self-development challenge. It involved me creating videos every day, and there was a lot of work going on behind it, in addition to everything else that I was doing. And I didn't look at like where I was that month in my cycle. Is that TMI? Sorry if it is. And it was really hard work. Like, I found it such an effort. Like, I did it because I'd made this commitment to do it, but oh my gosh, it was such a strain, and I didn't enjoy it at all. It was really hard going. So now if I'm doing things that are very creative and need a lot of energy and attention, then I will look at what part of the month I'm in and when I do it. So if I'm planning my month ahead, I'll look at kind of what I've got on, what I need to do, and factor in those like breaks, or not put so much pressure on myself at times when I need to kind of rest and take it a bit more easy. How can you create balance in your life? So maybe you're guilty of trying to do everything. Now, so many of us are guilty of this. Like, the whole mum guilt is a real thing. And again, anybody listening who's been trying to juggle half term and work will relate to this. You know, it can be very easy to look at social media and all these people having these amazing days out. And, you know, maybe that's the day you're having to work. And like, oh God, I haven't been here, or we haven't done this with the kids this holiday. We have to just be kind to ourselves. And I know I keep saying that during this episode, but I do really, really mean it. Where can you delegate? A lot of my clients who I work with struggle to delegate. So many of us have limiting beliefs built up from childhood or trauma or previous experiences that has made them feel that asking for help is a sign of weakness, or perhaps indicates laziness. And the thing is, to compensate for that, we normally set the bar so high, it's almost superhuman to reach that level. Or if you do reach it, it's just not feasible to maintain it. And then we wonder why we feel burnt out and like our head's going to explode. A really interesting book that I read it ages ago, but I went back to it recently, was Denise Duffield Thomas's book, which was Get Rich Lucky Bitch. Now, it's a really good book. All her books are actually really good, so I'd highly recommend listening to them if you're not familiar with them or you haven't listened to them before. But in that book, she talks about how she streamlined her life to make things easier and create this balance. So she shares, that's a tongue twister, she shares about how she found it really frustrating because she would always lose her keys, and she then created a keyless system. So her car was keyless, and then she transformed her whole house. As long as her keys are somewhere on her person, in a bag, she can get into her house. She has a cleaner, she has a personal chef. So when I first listened to this book, I can't lie, I did feel a bit triggered. I was like, oh, I could never do that. And it felt really indulgent and extravagant. But I actually journaled on that, and I was like, well, why am I triggered by that? And it came down to limiting beliefs that I had, that I worked on and cleared. And then when I re-listened to the book at a later date, I actually really admired her because she had these brilliant boundaries set for herself, that, created this balance in her life, that she honored herself. And by doing this, she created so much more ease and flow, and in turn made herself so much more productive. So I'm not saying, obviously, we all have to go keyless, have a personal chef, although that'd be quite nice. But we can look at ways that we can alleviate some of the burdens that we're putting on ourselves, the ways we can make things easier for us. And one of the things that I had to really learn was that it's okay to ask for help. I used to feel guilty, kind of like saying to my husband, oh, can you do this with the kids? Because he works longer hours than me. And I don't know about anybody else who works from home. There is always that kind of guilt of like, oh, I should be doing, I had the housework as well. It's trying to fit it all in. But then I realized it isn't down to me to do everything. So I did say to him, right, okay, we need to share some parts of the childcare or after school activities. I mean, that's a juggling act in itself, isn't it? Making sure the kids are all the different activities. If you've got kids that do multiple different tasks and activities each week, it's great to have active kids who are busy and out doing all these things. But it's like a military operation to coordinate who's where, taking this child, matches here, lunches in the car. So I made a real conscious decision to share that and explain and talk as well and communicate how you're feeling. If you're feeling frustrated, talk about it. digressing now on a bit of a tangent, but I work a lot with women, and we talk a lot about relationships. And when we're with our partners, and a lot of people will say, oh, they should know how I'm feeling. And the thing is, not everybody's going to be a mind reader and know how you're feeling. We have to communicate that, and that comes back to us and honoring ourselves and our boundaries and having that clear communication, because when there is clear communication, there's a clear understanding, and again, that is going to factor into having that better balance in your life. We can't take it all on board ourselves and hold on to that resentment. Communicate, talk about it, share how you're feeling with your partner. So I made small changes also in my life that made a big difference to that balance. They're not revolutionary or lavish. Certainly haven't got a personal chef. I don't have a cleaner or anything like that. But for me, it was my food shopping. So I used to hate going food shopping. I'm sure, well, actually no, I know there are people who love going food shopping. For me, it's just, I hate it. And it was like a couple of hours out of my working week. So I found just doing my shopping online was so much easier. I meal plan every week of what we're going to have, so I could be more precise when I was doing my online shopping, what ingredients I needed. It was also hugely cost effective too, because there was no greedy impulse purchases when I was walking by all those stands. Like, I'm such a sucker for those big kind of marketing board signs, like buy me, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll try that. Oh, that looks nice, that's new. And suddenly you've got an extra £20 worth of shopping in your trolley of just crap, because I'm easily influenced. So yeah, it was cost effective as well. Like I just said, planning my meals, so making sure there was like no wastage at home, or I had a rough idea of what we were going to have for dinner each night. Overhauling my morning routine, and I know I've talked about that in previous episodes, but just things like getting up that bit earlier made so much difference, because I wasn't starting the day feeling really frantic and flustered. Prioritizing my mindset, so not just my morning routine, my mindset as a whole, makes a massive difference to that feeling of kind of balance in my life. So just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I'm exempt from feeling frustrated or overwhelmed. Doesn't mean I don't have limiting beliefs or blocks. I absolutely do. I have regular therapy sessions myself. I listen to and read lots of personal development books. I love Audible, so because I'm at home by myself working, if I'm not with clients, then as a bit of background noise, I'm always listening to Audible books, podcasts. I also make sure I journal and meditate regularly as well, because I know for me, they are just like non-negotiables in feeling kind of that calmer, more level-headed space. And of course, yes, there are times where things slide because I'm human, I've got 3 children, I'm working. Like I said, again, it's about being kind to yourself, but it's acknowledging, right, okay, there's a bit of an imbalance here. I'm not feeling as good as I could. I know that I've been slipping in certain areas, and then I work to get that balance back again. And we learn through repetition, so the more we practice these kind of tools and techniques, the more ingrained they become. And then if you do have that kind of blip, or you forget to do things for a bit, or you go on holiday and things slide, you know how to get yourself back on track again. So look at your life as a whole. There's a really interesting technique that I share with my clients. You might have heard of it. It's called the Wheel of Life chart. It's a brilliant tool for creating balance and ultimately more joy in your life. So I'll link a template below, but you can find them on Google. You can print it out, or you can just draw one if you're creative in a notebook. But it looks at certain areas of your life. So it looks at things like friends and family, your partner, personal growth, fun and leisure, home environment, career, money and health. And then you basically score those from 1 to 10. So 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, on where you feel you have that balance in your life. Now, this is a really interesting and very visual activity to do, and it really highlights the areas of your life that maybe you need to improve upon. So when I use this with clients, they're often really shocked at how low they scored in certain areas, and it really acts like a wake-up call, particularly when they're looking at the areas of like personal growth and fun, because we get so bogged down in the day-to-day living, the going, that masculine energy of doing, we don't, or many of us just don't stop and kind of look after ourselves and create that, if no fun and enjoyment in life. Maybe you're guilty of saying you're busy. How many of us are guilty of saying that? Like, oh, I'm really busy. And we almost wear it like a badge of honor. And I have a lot of clients who, say, oh, well, I'm too busy to have therapy. I'm too busy to do my journaling or gratitude practice. Now, what we think about, we actually create more of. Now, there's a really interesting part of our brain called the reticular activating system. And this is a group of nerve cells at the base of your skull, at the top of your neck and spine. And it's a bit like a Google search engine. So if you feed information into this reticular activating system, it will run a search and it will bring up search results that support the belief that you inputted. So if, for example, you were sat there saying, I'm so busy, I'm too busy to do this, I'm too busy to do that, the reticular activating system will fire up and it will show you evidence to back up that belief. So it will suddenly remind you, yeah, you are too busy because you've got to do a food shop, you need to get the kids here, you need to buy a birthday present, you've got Christmas coming up, etc., until it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, you are too busy. Now, with the reticular activating system, we can use it to work for us. So if we feed in positive suggestions, it will support us with positive results. So if, for example, you are thinking about, starting up a yoga class again, or you want to do some, meditation, for example, you'll then start to see suggestions popping up to back up that new thought. For example, if you think about, okay, I want to go to a yoga class, then suddenly that afternoon a friend says to you, oh, there's a new yoga studio that's opened, would you like to go along? Or you might get an email from a yoga studio that you used to go to a few years ago. So where we place our thought energy really is going to affect how we feel. And I really, really can't stress that enough. I know I say it in every episode, like your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality, but it's such an important thing to know, understand, and remind ourselves of, because if we're telling ourselves it's too stressful, it's too busy, then that is the reality that we're going to see until we start to change that narrative around. And we are expected to work nowadays like we don't have kids. We're kind of encouraged to look after the kids like we don't work. But it comes down to us, because it's about us taking control of ourselves, prioritizing our needs. So the activity above with that wheel, that chart, is so helpful in identifying where you can kind of create that better harmony in your life and what's essential to you. Because if our mental health isn't in check, then it's also going to affect our physical health. So just one last thing on the subject of being busy, when people say, I'm too busy to do this, and maybe this is a bit of a harsh example, but if your leg was hanging off, you wouldn't say, and God forbid that was to ever happen, you wouldn't say, oh, I'm too busy to go to A&E, you'd find time. But we don't prioritise our mental health with the same importance. But your mental health is so important. Like I just said, if you are not prioritising your mental health, it is going to affect your physical health and ultimately anything that you are trying to do in your life. Sleep, again, another thing I bang on about every episode in some way, shape or form, but it really is so important. I really can't put enough emphasis on how vital sleep is for our physical and mental health. So when we're sleeping, we're not just, doing it for the sake of doing it. There is so much going on. We're storing memories, we're making sense of things, we're storing all the things that we're learning during the day. So it's like a housekeeping process as well. Our body is removing toxins in our brain when we sleep that have built up during the day. So it's kind of like that whole kind of deep cleanse. And in addition to the mental aspects, there's the physical aspects of sleep. Our body's healing, rejuvenating. It's, stopping the kind of slowing down the aging process. And it's no coincidence that sleep deprivation was used as a form of torture. I mean, anybody who's had kids or suffered with insomnia knows and can vouch for that. You can see how that was a form of torture, because it is absolutely torturous. So really prioritize your sleep. I think when it comes to self-care, getting that good quality sleep, really overhauling your bedtime routine, putting the phone down, and making sure you are in bed half an hour, 45 minutes before you actually need, and also looking at the amount of sleep you need as a person, because everybody varies, but making sure you are really focusing on sleep. Another point to bear in mind is learning to say no. And this is a huge one. We are so conditioned that saying no is rude, that makes us a bad person, etc., blah, blah, blah. That is not the case. If we are constantly saying yes when we really want to say no, then it is a guaranteed way to create an imbalance in our lives. There's nothing worse than saying yes and thinking, oh, why did I say that? Because now I've just meant that I'm doubling my workload. I'm going to end up staying up late tonight, or it's going to mean not having time with the family, whatever it might mean. And I work with so many clients who come to see me wanting to work on this and learn to say no and implement those boundaries, because it really is a source of guilt in us, that, makes me a bad person, I can't say no. Now, a lot of people, there are valid experiences that have happened in their lives that make it hard for us to say no, and implement those boundaries. So if you can relate to this and identify that maybe that's something you need to work on, but maybe it's not something you can kind of get to the bottom of yourself, working with a therapist is so helpful in kind of identifying that belief, so you can reframe it and learn that no isn't a bad thing, and actually putting yourself first is the most selfless thing you can do. Focus on bringing more joy into your life. So again, I have lots of clients who say they're too busy, and I did touch on that before when I was talking about being busy, but we absolutely have to prioritize our needs, and not just like the mindset stuff, but just doing things that make you feel good. Practicing that hobby that you have, taking that hobby back up again, just chilling out and reading your book for half an hour, whatever brings you joy. And I'm not sure if I've stressed this enough over the last 20 minutes, but make time for yourself, even if it is a short time, even if it is just 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it might be. If it means the washing has to wait, then so be it. The world's not going to end. But if we're putting yourself first is not selfish, it is essential. And we have to start changing this narrative that we're telling ourselves. We have to start to begin to see the importance of putting our needs first, because when we do, then we'll see the benefits of doing that. And when you see the benefits, it's almost like a penny dropping moment. It's like, why have I not done this before? So if you would like more support on anything that I've spoken about today, or you're interested in working with me, all my details are linked below in the show notes. And just to mention here, if you are interested in working with me, I offer all my new clients a free Zoom call, which is just a really great way for us to meet, talk through your needs in more detail, how you're looking to use sessions, and obviously I'll explain how it all works. But all the details of that are below. And also, if you enjoyed this episode or you're enjoying the podcast, I would be super grateful if you would download it and also leave a review, because it really helps me to get this out to lots of different people who else might benefit from listening to this. So I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will speak to you all again soon. Take care.